Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast, and I am excited to have another amazing guest today. We have a lot to talk about. This gentleman has done so many things in his life, and I can't wait for him to tell you his story. So this is David Pollock, who has an extensive background in business development, local government, regional and statewide advocacy, and nonprofit organizations. Since July of 2020, he has been responsible for marketing, business development, and client intake for the Green Law Group. David also serves as executive director of California Arbitration. David is a strong believer in public service and has served on the Moorpark City Council, the Regional Council of the Southern California Association of Governments, the board of the League of California Cities, the board of the Moorpark Unified School District, and as president of the California School Boards Association. David is actively involved in environmental issues and served as a board member of the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. He is also a past chair of both the Energy and Environment Committee for SCAG and the Environmental Quality Committee for the League of California Cities. As an active community leader, David serves as president of the Moorpark Education Foundation, as a board member of the Moorpark College Foundation, and a board member of the Moorpark Foundation for the Arts. David is also known for his career as a child actor, most notably for his role as Rudy Stein in the Bad News Bears movies. David holds an MBA degree from the UCLA Anderson School and BS degree from Pepperdine University. I told you guys he has a killer resume, and here he is, David Pollock. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, that almost sounds overwhelming.
Well, it is a little bit overwhelming, but it's the truth because, you have done so much here in Moorpark, and I have to say that you have been an inspiration for myself and my wife, for someone that really, truly serves the community of Moorpark. And I'm just excited to let you tell everybody, all of the things that you've done and dive into a little bit more detail. But because the name of the show is Master Motivation, David, I got to ask you, what is your motivation, or what is your motivational hack for being involved in all of these things?
It's funny, when I was thinking about appearing for this show, it made me think about what my motivation was, because sometimes you just do things without, really thinking about what's motivating you. And so it was kind of interesting to think back on all the things. The community service is an easy one. I believe in, giving back to the community. I care about the community. I don't always like what I'm reading in the newspaper, so I like to be involved and try and make our community a better place. And that's been kind of a theme in my life is, I was taught to always leave places better than you found them, and I try and do that with community and the other things that I do. So yeah. I originally my community service started when my kids started going to school in Moorpark. That's one of the reasons I moved here, was because of the quality of the schools. And back then, this was in the early 90s. Things weren't going so well for public schools in general. And I was a little bit concerned as a parent. I'm going to be sending my kids to these schools. I'd kind of like to have a hand in the quality. And coincidentally, the school board was forming a committee for effective schools, which was going to be tasked by the school board to look at what they could do to make our elementary schools in particular more effective. And I thought, I just finished my MBA degree, and I like to tell people I eat spreadsheets for breakfast. And I thought that this would be kind of a cool post-graduation assignment, just to be involved with this committee. And that ended up being a slippery slope. The committee was 29 people from all over the community, within and without the school district. And I ended up chairing that committee for 14 months. And the innovations that we came up with, the school board liked and adopted, and they're still in effect to this day. So I was very proud of that. But because of that, people were saying, well, hey, you may want to consider being on the school board to make sure that these things get implemented the right way. And I said, well, that made a lot of sense. So I went ahead and did that, and got really involved with schools locally. And then I found out that there's other organizations associated with schools where I could have an influence as well. I ended up being president of the Ventura County School Boards Association, and eventually the California School Boards Association, where I represented almost 1,000 school districts across the state. But
Wow.
I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here.
No, that's okay. But what I love is that you saw a problem or you saw something that you were not necessarily happy about or concerned with, and rather than sitting back and bitching and moaning like most people do, you just jumped right in there and put yourself out there, be part of the solution, help serve, make a better community. It My wife and I got involved really, and more Jackie than I in the beginning, was the very same reason. We saw what our kids were doing, and I don't think that it was because we were concerned necessarily. It's just we wanted to be an involved parent. And when I'm talking about that, maybe take a minute to go back, because you were taught to leave things better than you found them, right? Tell me a little bit more about your upbringing from your parents and what your parents taught you in that regard.
Well, I'd like to give them full credit, and I'm sure they had that philosophy too, but I got that from a number of different sources. I kind of pieced that together. I had a very independent childhood, and this was one of the interesting things in thinking about your shows, thinking back to what was going on in my childhood that motivated me to want to be an actor.
Hmm.
And I always knew that was right about the time that my parents were divorcing. So in some ways, it was me taking control over my own life and have some outside interest outside of the home. And my parents were supportive of that, even though they were splitting. They said that, hey, if you really want to be an actor, you need to go to acting school. And I said, fine, let's sign me up. And I went to the Arcadia Children's Theater for a year and thought, hey, I really enjoyed this. I was only 8 years old at that point, but I saw this as something that really interested me and I wanted to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my parents probably thought that, all right, well, this will be kind of a tough lesson in real life for him, and he'll find out what competition is like and how hard it is to succeed in a business where a good 98% of the Screen Actors Guild is unemployed on any given day. But they helped me get an agent, and my first interview for a toy commercial, I was hired. So that was a great start to validate my interest in
One for
that.
one.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. I pursued that till I was about the age of 17. And it led to all sorts of wonderful things, including some pretty famous movies. But it came at a cost. It kind of ended my childhood early because I had to, at the age of 8, start learning what it's like to be a professional, deal with disappointment and rejection. Because despite my first interview, my batting average was about 1 out of 6 going on. I went to well over 120 interviews, I think, when we stopped keeping track. So learning how to deal with that disappointment and the responsibility of being a professional, even though you're a child, you're earning money at this and you're expected to show up on time and be prepared and all those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I definitely want to talk about the movies and talking about being a child actor. I do want to ask, you come from a home where your parents divorced early.
Mm-hmm.
How did that affect you or affect your relationships with others or with them as you were growing up?
Well, my dad got to be kind of the Disneyland dad. He'd swoop in every other week and we'd spend a weekend with him. And that was always fun. But I watched my mother struggle as a single mother in doing what she wanted to do. And we moved fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I think we lived in 4 or 5 different places as I was growing up, which made it, put me in the position of having to keep making new friends. And it was kind of like being a military brat, having to move places and deal with a new environment and making new friends. Mm-hmm. And I think that was character building. It's not for everybody, but it's good for developing social skills and empathetic skills, which kind of fed into my acting career.
Right. And you mentioned, you had a very independent childhood. So, the kind of the moving around, you had to adapt very easily, very quickly, or not adapt. Um, talk about the pros and cons of that independence, and things that maybe you learned or things that you took from your childhood that you wanted to avoid as an adult, or you wanted to avoid as you became a father. Um, talk about that for a minute.
Sure. And there were some great lessons there. So a lot of the people I worked with as a child actor had the original helicopter parents or the helicopter mom, and we called them set moms, and um, they met every stereotype you can think of. Some of them were extremely controlling and very involved in their child's life, and I think were living vicariously through their children, and wanted them to be successful for their own ego. I was fortunate. My mother was busy, trying to make a living. My father was off doing his own thing. They were supportive, but disinterested in what I was doing. So, a lot of times I'd have to hire somebody to take me to an interview because I couldn't drive, and hire someone to be my set sitter because my parents didn't have time to, be the adult on the set responsible for me. So I was arranging for all those things growing up, and saving money as well, to thinking about what I wanted to do in the future.
Mhm.
So there were a lot of lessons in that. It's like I said, you grow up quickly in an environment like that because you don't have the luxury of being a typical child with very few worries. But I also feel fortunate that I also wasn't being overly controlled by my parents, because I'm an independent sort, and I don't think that would have gone over very well.
Mhm.
So
Any regrets on that, or any thoughts of, would you have changed anything?
no, actually, I don't think I would have. I'm glad that it happened that way. My only regret is I think, well, what would my childhood have been like if I wasn't so independent and ambitious?
Hmm.
But that's who I am, and that's what I did. So I have no regrets.
Well, I think that kind of mindset, because some people can get stuck in, well, uh, everything was a problem, and I would have gone back and changed this. But what you're saying and what I'm hearing is, everything that happened in your childhood was a lesson. Everything, you took it as a way to benefit from, or to grow from, and use it, later in life. So I think that that's just a great mindset shift sometimes, where um, you know people might feel sorry for themselves, or feel like, a negative experience. It's always doom and gloom, instead of looking at that bad experience or negative experience. And I'm not saying that it was necessarily,
Mhm.
but being able to take that and say, hey, I can grow from that, I can learn from that. And again, with the theme of motivation, it's good for us to remind ourselves that. And I know for sure that there's plenty of situations that I've been in as a child, as a young adult, as an adult now. You go through a situation, and you dwell in the problem, and not necessarily the lesson that came out of that potential problem or challenge. Now, I have to ask, got to ask, because when I was a kid, I watched all the Bad News Bears, right? And I watched the remakes. What was that experience like, being on that particular movie and that part of that?
Well, I have to say that, well, first of all, it was a nationwide casting call. And I think I was just one of the few child actors that actually were professional actors. They brought in a lot of newbies from Texas and from New Jersey. And Michael Ritchie was the director, and he had a really good sense of putting casts together, because the group that he put together, there really was a certain camaraderie and a magic to it. I mean, we all got along, we all played off of each other, and it really showed up in the movie. But doing the movie, we didn't have any sense that this was going to be anything other than just kind of a fun summer kids movie that we'll be proud of, but probably won't get much mention. So I was as surprised as anyone else that it really took off, and suddenly we're going off on promotional tours and being signed up for multi-picture contracts with Paramount Pictures. saying, "Oh, well, that was kind of heady," and the magic carried through to the second movie that we did, Bad News Bears and Breaking Training, because we had mostly the same cast, and we just had some other new additions, and those kind of worked. It wasn't as good a movie as the original, but it was fun like the original one because we kind of still played off each other. But by the time we did film the third movie in Japan with Tony Curtis, the magic was gone, and the director we had was not good at working with kids and was kind of volatile, and you kind of could sense that this isn't fun anymore. Now this has just become a job. I hope they make their money back on this, and I was actually on contract to make even a fourth movie that they ended up having to pay me for, even though they decided not to make it. And that was unfortunate because they were negotiating to do the Bad News Bears go to Cuba, and they were going to try and have Fidel Castro as the coach of the Cuban team, and that would have been, I would have loved for that to go on, but you can only push the franchise so far before it starts becoming dull.
Yeah. So for the most part, the experience was kind of fun, especially in the beginning. Any notable stories on the filming with the cast and with the other kids that you worked with?
Well, I do remember when you start a movie, you usually sit down and do a script read through with the entire cast, which is helpful. And one of the things I pointed out in the very beginning was my character's name in the script was Lefty Stein. And I let our director know that, hey, not only am I not a very good pitcher, but I'm right-handed. If you want me to pitch with my left hand, that's going to be pretty wild. And Walter Matthau actually kind of on the cuff said, "Oh, why don't we call you Rudy?" And it stuck, and then we changed the name in the script. And it kind of went from there. We in 2000, we've never had a complete cast reunion, and we've kind of met in small groups here and there. But probably the closest we came to was a photo shoot for TV Guide. Remember TV Guide?
Yeah.
Back in 2000, they did a feature article about where are the Bad News Bears kids now, and they got, I think, 6 of us together. And it was the first time we had to really chat about the movie and what we really liked about it. And what struck me as odd was the scene that the kids remembered the most was me having Walter Matthau trying to talk me into go and get hit by the ball again. And that was a tough shot to do because I would look up at him, and every time he would burst out laughing. And so here's probably one of the most iconic comedic actors of all time, and he thinks I'm funny. That's quite a compliment. We must have done that take at least 20 times. But The one piece of advice that Walter Matthau gave me that I didn't fully understand at the time, but I get it now, is he said, when acting in comedy, he said, don't put whipped cream on top of the whipped cream. I said, oh, okay, thanks, Walter. I'll ponder that.
So what was he really just that funny and easy and fun to work with?
He was. He really was. He liked the kids. He had a kid our age, Charlie, who I'm still in touch with, and Charlie even has a cameo role in the movie. But yeah, he was just kind of he was naturally funny and naturally easygoing, and you felt relaxed with him. And he was kind of a mentor to us, like giving us little quips like the whipped cream remark. But then he would also, his friends would come by. One day I remember he brought Jack back from The Odd Couple, and they got together with us, and we all walked down to Baskin Robbins and had an ice cream together, and nice little memories like that really went a long way to kind of create the camaraderie that you actually saw in the movie. Jack Lemmon, who was looking up.
Yeah. So any contact with anybody from that movie or any other movies that you were involved with to this day?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. see, gosh, Brett Marks, I actually lived with for a while after the movie with his family. So I've been in touch with his family ever since. Chris Barnes, I've only talked to on the phone, but we stay in touch. Scott Firestone, I just visited a couple of months ago at his home. He went from in front of the camera to behind the camera and made video production his profession. Gary Caballero, who played Engelberg, lives in Texas, and we get together every once in a while. We've done a couple of charity events together, and occasionally we'll go to autograph signing conventions. We've done that a couple of times. Aaron Blunt, who played Abdul Rahim in the movie, also we get together on occasion. Brandon Cruz, I've seen, who played the Yankees pitcher in the movie. He lives in Ventura County, and we get together every once in a while. Who else? Jackie Earl Haley also lives in Texas, and his career has of all of us, his has gone the farthest. Well, I shouldn't say that. Tatum O'Neal had already had an Academy Award when we did the movie, but Jackie went on to earn an Oscar nomination for his role in Little Children, and he has a production company also in San Antonio, Texas. And so he kind of went behind the camera as well.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Who was the funniest, or who was the biggest jokester out of the group?
The biggest jokester.
Because it was such a funny group of kids. Like every scene in that movie, it's just everybody's cracking on somebody, or there's always something going on. So that's the feeling I get.
It was really all of us. Michael Ritchie, our director, encouraged us to, ad lib every once in a while and kind of be loose with the script. And even in the movie, there's a scene where Abdul Rahim gets struck by a ball right where it hurts, and they're calling for a stretcher, and Brandon Cruz kind of ad-libbed the lines that a stretcher for his balls, and that actually made it in the movie, was not in the script. So there was that kind of thing going on.
That's funny. What were your thoughts on the remake?
I honestly thought that was more of a sequel to Bad Santa than a remake of the Bad News Bears. And there was some talk during the filming that they were going to have some cameo roles for the original Bad News Bears as parents in the stands, and that never came off.
That would have been good.
Yeah. So unfortunately, that again, it's not easy to put that kind of cast together. It's all in the casting.
Right. I mean, it's hard to beat the original. I mean, I watch a lot of remakes of different movies, and I'm just like, it just takes away from, in my opinion, what the original really meant. I mean, I don't care. Make a million sequels, but you can't remake, a classic like that. So cool. Well, thanks for sharing that information. So let's get back, at the very beginning, we talked about what motivates you to do everything, and service to your community is very high on your list. And if I remember correctly, the very first thing you got involved with was a committee before you joined the school board. So that was before anything. That was before city council. That was before anything else you did here. So you said it's a slippery slope. I know that feeling. You get involved in one thing, and before you know it, you're involved in everything. And tell me about some of your experience, because the public sometimes is pretty rough, right? Like, at least I feel that way. You're criticized for doing so much. You're criticized for doing it for the wrong reason. You're criticized for doing it for, personal gain. I'm sure you've experienced all of these things. So maybe not necessarily in the beginning, but tell me how you deal with that, or how you've dealt with that.
Well, you have to have a pretty thick skin to be in politics, especially today, because it's gotten even more uncivil, I would say. And my work in the corporate world kind of helped me with that, and having to be in committee meetings and deal with people that are unhappy. But I think the public has a poor understanding of what actually goes on in government and how a democracy works. And so, and that's one of the things I'm doing now. I have a class that I'm putting on at Cal Lutheran, and I'll probably do it at CSU Channel Islands too, talking about government in general, because most people have no idea how many governments there are, let alone who represents them in it and how it really works. So I think if people understood better how it's set up and why, they would be at least a little less cynical. And that's what bothers, it doesn't bother me that people have strong feelings about decisions that we're making, even if they're not fully informed on why the decision is being made that way. That's their perspective, and that would always factor into my thinking. But I really wish that people, I think we need more civics education in public schools, for one thing, because we don't get a real good grasp of how government works unless you get involved in it. And right. Even going onto the school board, I carried a lot of misperceptions about fraud, waste, and abuse, and this, by golly, I have an MBA. If anybody's going to find all of this wasted money, it's going to be me. And then you start to appreciate actually how much they actually accomplish with as little money as they get. And you're kind of disappointed if you were thinking you were going to find some pot of gold in there that you're going to be able to deliver to the public. I can say in almost all cases, the public's money is watched after very closely, both by the professionals and by the elected representatives. You take that very seriously. You've been entrusted with a lot of taxpayer money, and you certainly don't want to become part of that cynicism by doing something that is not in the public's best interest. So you take an oath of office, even at school board or city council, you take that same oath of office about protecting the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California. And that's kind of heady stuff. And you take that very seriously. And it's kind of disappointing when people just assume that you're corrupt and don't care about the public. Most people go into it for the right reasons. And unfortunately, there are those celebrated cases where somebody is in it for the wrong reason and does something unethical or even illegal, and it gives all elected officials a bad name when they do that. Even though they're very far and few between, it's done enough that it sours the public's opinion about their elected officials. And that's unfortunate because it erodes faith in democracy itself. And that's the most dangerous thing, because we have something special here in the United States that we could lose if we don't guard it carefully. And especially in these times, I'm really concerned about that, and that's why I stepped down from the city council in December, so I'm relieved of the yoke of public office, but I still want to be involved in helping people understand their government and appreciate how things actually work and why.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges is the spread of misinformation or people that are misinformed. Social media really only exacerbates that by people just commenting, and like you can watch a thread go from a very simple comment to 100 comments deep because everybody wants to jump in and give their opinion, but they never really did any research behind what the actual problem was. And it's just awesome to watch all the armchair quarterbacks sit back from the sidelines and pitch their input when they've never helped or done anything in their life other than complain about the way that it is. I just find that very, it's disheartening sometimes because you start to wonder, when you're doing so much with your heart, right? You lead with passion and your heart, and you really have the best interest of everybody involved. And for someone to, take it the wrong way and cast stones, it's like, man, I'm doing everything I can to do what I think is right, to do what I think is best for everybody, to help our community grow. And and this is the thanks I get. But like you said in the beginning, you got to come in with thick skin. You got to come in knowing that that's going to come at you. And I think that any leader in any position, whether it's in the corporate world, you're a small business owner, You're a local leader, community leader. That just comes with the territory. Now, what were some of your biggest obstacles going into becoming a member of the school board or city council, and what are you most proud of that came out of either one of those?
Oh goodness, there's a lot of things that I'm proud of. Certainly with the school board, I mentioned the reforms that we implemented for our elementary schools, and those were simple. We kind of made them into charter schools, back when charter schools were just getting started. And as you know, we have 6 elementary schools, and they have open enrollment every year. You don't have to go to your neighborhood elementary school. You can choose another school, and we gave reasons that you might, because we had the staff of each school decide what their philosophy of teaching was. So we had a school that's specialized in focusing on writing, another one that focuses on the performing arts. We had Flory, which is a school of science and technology. And if you have a kid that's really sparked by all things space, or just has a real great technical mind, you might want them to go to Flory School and be turned on by that environment. And that turned out to be a pretty powerful model, not just for the kids, because still most people let their kids go to their neighborhood school out of convenience. But it turned out to be a powerful model for the teaching staff at each school, because they had to come together and decide what is our collective philosophy on teaching this curriculum here. And that was a powerful model. And what that led to, and what I'm most proud of in my school board service, was those kids went on to middle school and high school. And when they got to Moorpark High School, they came across the academic decathlon program, where the best were selected to be in that program. We had a crazy teacher there named Larry Jones and his wife Marilyn, who were fanatics about showing what kids with a little bit of coaching could really do. And we ended up, in my 13 years on the school board, we won the national academic decathlon 4 times, which was pretty impressive. No school district or high school had ever done that from Ventura County. And I was so proud of what the kids could do. I would help Larry with coaching them on interviews and speeches. And I remember telling Larry, I can't do that kind of a speech now, let alone when I was in high school. How do you coax this out of these kids? It's amazing.
Yeah.
So that was my pride and joy in seeing the kids really take off, showing what a good solid public education can accomplish. And by the way, they were competing against 2,000 public and private high schools from across the country in doing this.
Yeah, we have a pretty, I think, I grew up in the Conejo Valley, so I went to Conejo Valley schools, and, and I know that maybe a couple decades apart, things obviously evolved and changed, but when I moved to Moorpark, and then especially when our kids started going to school in Moorpark, it's so unique, because we have our own school district, separate from, the other areas, and there's so few schools. I mean, we're just this little small town right in between 2 of the biggest in the county, and it's just so unique. Everything that we do in our school district is so unique, and I just find it so rattling that there's these complaints again about things that, man, if you went to LA Unified, you're not getting anything like what we get here. I mean, no way, no how, right? And just everything about Moorpark is so unique. So I love our schools. I love being involved in our schools. I'm proud that our children have gone through the schools. They were given so many opportunities that I don't think that I ever received as a child in my time in school. Again, maybe that just evolved because of time. But tell me, what do you think? Why are our schools and public schools in general, what do you think is the real reason why enrollment is declining?
Well, that's just demographics. the way we would predict our enrollment every year at in Moorpark schools and any other school district in the state is you would just simply, advance, the first graders to second grade, second graders to third grade, to just move all the cohorts one grade forward, assuming you're going to keep all those kids. And then you had to predict what the kindergarten class is going to look like. And so we were always pretty accurate with projecting what our enrollment is. So the problem is that when people stop having kids, the kindergarten enrollment starts going lower, and then that cascades, through all the years. It moves fairly slowly, but our our people having children has gone down considerably with the latest generation, and we have declining enrollment because of that. It's unfortunate, and that's partly because of the cynicism in the world. Young parents today are thinking, geez, with all this crazy stuff going on, do I really want to bring kids into this world? Or if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it later, and then it never really happens.
Right. Tell me about your time on the Moorpark Education Foundation, the goals for the program, your purpose, your motivation behind, being the president now. Tell us what's going on.
Well, that's something I became involved in when I stepped off the school board and onto the city council. I wanted to still, have some influence of what was going on in the schools, and so I joined the board of the Education Foundation. And our job there is, every school has a PTA or an organization raising money for local programs there, but we're kind of an overarching organization saying, wanting to take on the bigger challenges. And we're in the midst of reinventing ourselves because we got caught in the role of putting on fundraisers, and our fundraiser was the food truck meetup, making as much money as we can from that, and then deciding how we're going to spend it to help our schools. And we would often take the direction of the district and the schools and what the biggest need was. So we're flipping that on its head now, and we've said, all right, let's not do, we're putting the cart before the horse here. Let's decide what is the big impact that we want to have on the schools, and then fundraise around that. So instead of just being an event that's fun and people don't necessarily care that they're raising for any particular program, just that it's for the schools. Let's figure out where can we have a real impact, and how do we do that? So we're in the midst of that, and we have committees forming to look at things like middle school athletics and elementary school orchestra, for example. It's something where we think we can have a big impact. So we're getting started on that, and then we'll be reaching out to the community saying, hey, if you have a real interest in seeing kids in elementary school developing their skills on all sorts of instruments, including string instruments and horns and whatever, help us help them, because that's not obviously part of the core of the curriculum at the school district, but it's something that is what we would call a co-curricular activity. Playing music is very helpful in everything else because it's mathematics when you get right down to it. So we're doing that, and I'm proud of the things that we've done, and poised to be proud of the great things yet to come from that organization.
Yeah, I love the idea of more sports in the middle school. We have a lot of youth sports in our town, and I just, being a martial arts instructor, being involved in athletics, my entire life, I just have such a strong passion for it. I love to see them have more opportunity. One of the biggest challenges, and this is where my wife has gotten involved in probably everything here in Moorpark, is that it's really hard to raise funds. I mean, fundraising is so hard now, I think more than ever, because everybody's fundraising, every program, and as a small business owner, we want to support and help wherever we can. But man, when you're getting hit up by dozens and dozens of people, it's really hard to give a substantial commitment. But what do you think is the biggest obstacle for the foundation or for anybody that's fundraising? What do you think is the biggest obstacle? And
Well,
What can
think,
we do to spread more awareness or to get more help?
well, I think the one aha that we came up with was that I think most people are realizing it's really hard to fundraise through events, especially if you have a volunteer board, because you can burn them out really quickly. It's hard work, and it's hard to find people that are willing to volunteer their time and are good at organizing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's still some room for that, but what I'm learning is that it's better to, create the end before you look for the means, and figure out exactly what it is that you want to stand for in the community,
Mm-hmm.
and then look for the community support of that. Because most of our big donations have come from institutions like Adventist Health has been a big supporter of our education foundation. And you and Jackie have been great supporters. And other martial arts organizations in the community see that connection to supporting public schools. So that's more what we're focused on is, how can we do things that you could really get behind, and that
Mm-hmm.
you'll want a deep digger into your pocket, or that we can start applying for grants for as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or getting organizations involved that never saw themselves being involved with public education, but might be interested in doing something if it's a specific thing that fits with what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're at now, and trying to develop a network of supporters that don't need to go to a gala or a food truck meetup,
Mm-hmm.
but really would like to be making a difference in public schools. Those are the people that we want to reach out to and nurture those relationships so that they can help us help our kids.
Awesome. Well, as you know, we feel very strongly that our kids, our students, are the future of Moorpark, and we need to provide them and support them with as much of whatever we can give them to not make it easier, but really just to make it possible and to provide more opportunity. You know what I mean? It's like
I
I
do
have a
know.
hard time. I have a hard time when I don't see people supporting or giving back or getting involved, because our kids are our future. They're going to be our future school board members, city council. And, if you look at the way society in general, where most people are kind of sitting back and watching what's happening, you can't make any change by watching what's happening. If you continue to just allow it to be that way, then you're just as much a part of the problem as anybody else at the top. I mean, we don't have to get all political, but I mean, there's lots of problems. There's tons of problems, and people are sitting back, watching it happen, doing absolutely nothing.
And that's why I often tell people democracy is not a spectator sport. It's meant for you to be engaged, and you have a responsibility to be engaged in what's going on. The
Definitely.
first thing is to understand who represents you in the different governments that you're represented in.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt many people know who the representative is on the water board, for example. They probably don't even know that there's a water board.
Mm-hmm.
What
Right.
we used to, in my corporate life, we used to lament that our executives thought that dial tone came from God, that they had no idea all of the equipment and work that went into making those phones work. And that's the same thing with people in their government. They have no idea what's going on in the machinery of government, but they're very quick to become cynical.
Right.
So and that's what I point out to people to, if you don't like the way it's being done, then damn it, get involved.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we were put in charge as the people of the United States, of our government. And there are a lot of cynical people around the world that thinks our experiment will fail. You can't just put the people in charge; they're going to muck it all up. So so far we've held on for over 200 years, and I'm hoping that, and we've been an inspiration to the rest of the world. So I can't, even though democracy isn't perfect, I can't think of a better way to do it, or certainly not a more fair way to do it. So
Well, let's talk about let's talk about city council real quick before we get towards wrapping up. Talk a little bit more about city council, and of course we haven't even really talked about your career. So let's start with city council. What was the reason that you wanted to get on city council? What were your goals to accomplish, and did you accomplish those goals?
So that this city council wasn't on my radar screen. I was looking to, step down from the school board because I had been doing it I'd been elected to a fourth term, and I told people this is my last term doing this. I didn't even want to do the last term, but no one else would step up. So I said, okay, I'll give it 4 more years, but then you need to find somebody else. And in the middle of that, there was an unexpected vacancy on the city council, which I didn't think much about. But I was approached by a group of people in the community that said, hey, we'd really like you to think about this. We think you'd be good at doing this. And I told them, all right, well, give me the weekend to think it over. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity to serve in a different way and learn a different part of government and how that works. And that interested me. So I stepped up to do that and ran and won in the special election, and then had to win again at the next regular election, and then 2 more times after that. So I spent a total of 13 years on the city council after 15 years on the school board.
And did you have a specific goal or agenda that you wanted to fulfill in your time?
Well, there were some things going on then. For example, the High Street Theater's future was very much in question at that point, and the city had recently purchased it and was trying to figure out what to do with it. So I was very supportive of doing a little bit of subsidy to get them on their feet. Not to be, I didn't want to keep subsidizing them, but I wanted to at least inject them with some money to get things going, and that has paid back manyfold. We've got a great group going at the theater, and that's one of the things that I've gotten involved with since stepping down from the city council is being on the board of the Moorpark Foundation for the Arts, which is having a gala here coming up on August 26th. If anybody wants to sign up for that.
Quick little plug.
Quick little plug there.
Yeah.
But there was that, and there were things I wanted to see in the city. For example, Princeton Road, as you well know, has been dilapidated for a long time. So I thought within a year or two of being on the city council that I could get that project off the ground. And that was probably my greatest frustration is trying to get that project done, but it's finally being built, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of during my tenure, we also built and opened the Ruben Castro Community Services Center, which is community services all under one roof, including county health, interface, Catholic Charities is there with their food distribution. So that's a great public building.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm happy with seeing what's going on High Street. And that's another thing that I've been wanting to do something about for many years, even before being on the school board. I thought, God, there is just so much potential for High Street, our historic little downtown area. How do we get people to invest in that? And now we have a big construction project going on the south side of the street there that's going to really change High Street. And we've put lights in the poles, and we're doing a holiday on High Street that you're involved with. And we did a beer festival on High Street for a while, but now we're going to do an apricot festival, and we have our Country Days parade every October that brings people down there. And as you would expect, if you focus enough time and energy on that, the money will come too. I'm starting to see the next generation investing in property on High Street and opening restaurants like M1 High and Luna Llena, and more coming. So I'm hopeful in the next few years we'll see a very different High Street as kind of a cultural center for the community and draw people from all over the county, just as a fun place to go.
Now, how do you respond to those that live in Moorpark that they want it to stay the same? They don't change High Street, leave it alone. They don't want new houses. Leave it alone. Like they just want it to stay the same. How do you respond to these people?
It's a legitimate point of view, and I think their heart's in the right place because they like what we have, and they don't want it to be screwed up. And that's a voice that I had to listen to as a city council member and did factor into my thinking. But I also knew that people couldn't afford to live in Moorpark anymore. Our children are moving away. My kids don't live in Moorpark anymore because they couldn't afford it. And we would be really nice if the people that work in Moorpark, like our teachers and our firefighters and our police officers, who also can't afford to live in Moorpark, it would be nice if they could afford to live and work in the same community. So that became kind of an overriding factor. Not to mention, the state regional housing needs assessment, which actually allocates a certain amount of housing. You have to do your fair share as a city to deal with the affordable housing crisis. And what people don't understand about that is part of the problem is that over the years we've allocated 3/4 of our residential zoning to single family houses, and that's made it very limiting for people. You have to. I was fortunate because of my acting career and a number of other things. I could afford to get into the housing market early on, but it's really tough these days for. I don't know how anyone can afford a house these days. I don't know if I could afford my house if I had to buy it today. So I'm really concerned about that factor, and keeping it the same also would lock in that inequity. So you have to balance that. So you want to provide enough housing that it's somewhat affordable, but then you also don't want to have you don't want to lose the character of the community. And right. So that ends up being something you have to balance from a public policy perspective.
I think that's the biggest thing is people want to keep the charm of the small town, right? Everybody takes a lot of pride in Moorpark being a nice little small town. And I mean, if you're looking at Simi Valley, if you're looking at Thousand Oaks, if you even consider looking at San Fernando Valley, we're in a good place. We're in a good spot. We've got a good thing going. I think we have good leaders in charge that are making good decisions. So I think the future is still bright. I think everything's going to work out. And I think in the end, when High Street is all built out and we see the life that it brings to that downtown area, I think that people are going to be really excited and probably really proud to live in Moorpark. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Now, I do want to finish just talking about your current career. You were a child actor, right? So did you have goals as far as like what you want to be when you grow up? Like going to college, what was the plan? Did you follow that plan? And where are you now?
Yeah, I still haven't decided what I want to be when I grow up, but I'm working on it. No, it was, I have so many interests. So my dilemma was deciding what's more practical and what really interests me the most. Mm-hmm. So I pretty much stopped acting right by the time I was age 17. I was kind of burned out on it. And I had a few examples in the industry that were kind of the ghosts of Christmas future that I didn't want to see. So I thought, well, let me get more into the real world. And I took an interest in flying when I was 17, actually. I took the acting money I saved up and started taking flying lessons and got into it. And within a year, I was a flight instructor. And it's funny, I look back now at my students back then watching this 18-year-old walk out as their flight instructor, what they must have thought. But I thought, okay, well, this is a great start. Maybe I'll become an airline pilot. Well, that wasn't a practical goal because my eyes weren't perfect. They never have been. So I had trouble hanging on to a first class health certificate for flying. And the airlines weren't hiring anyway. And who they were hiring were Air Force jet jockeys. So that wasn't practical. But, I got a job at Flying Tigers, which at the time was the world's largest air cargo airline. And they were based at LA Airport. So I was able to take those skills and get into flight operations. And that kind of evolved over time. I developed their fleet management system and learned something about computers. Then I got hired by Rockwell International at their Rocketdyne division to do strategic planning for their systems because they were having problems keeping track of all the parts on the space shuttle. And they sent me to graduate school to get my MBA. And after I graduated from that, I moved over into business development. And that's where that started. Instead of just doing plans for information technology, now I was doing the annual operating plan and the long range plan for the division itself. And that's kind of evolved. I got involved with a lot of industry associations. And at the same time, I was involved with the School Boards Association, and that was a really crazy time trying to juggle all of those things. But after I stepped down as president of the California School Boards Association, I was offered a job there to do their business development. And so I did that for a while. And then after 5.5 years of that, I became an independent consultant doing advisory work for a company that does solar panel systems for schools all over Southern California. And eventually found my way into the legal profession because my background in government is kind of, as a lawmaker myself, doing local municipal laws, I kind of understood the legal profession, even though I'm not an attorney. I do understand the business and how to apply business development techniques to that. So I've been doing that for the last several years here at the Green Law Group. And one thing that's interesting in my position, I'm the director of client relations for them. And I take all of the intake calls from people calling wanting some legal advice. And I'm always surprised at the number of people that don't realize that they can go to their city council representative or to their state representative or their member of Congress. I have someone call me and say, I want to sue the Social Security Administration. Okay, and that's what people think of. They get angry. First thing they want to do is sue. So before you take that on, suing the federal government, why don't you call your congresswoman's office and see if their staff can help you? Because they represent you. You're their constituent. They work for you. You should give them a shot at trying to resolve this. And when they do that, those problems usually get solved, and they don't have to spend lots of money on attorneys doing something that they could have done themselves. So that comes back to my original point. People don't know about the government and what influence they have as just voters and citizens and residents. So that's kind of feeding into my trying to teach people how to take charge in making sure that they're getting the service they need from their government and influencing where they're the policy making of their government.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing that timeline of your career. And I think that's just great advice, right? Trying to find the right people to answer the questions versus, you don't always need to make a big
when
deal.
you're angry, you want to strike out, and
right.
A lot of thought doesn't go into that.
Post it on social media. You'll get an answer. Or
yeah, exactly. That doesn't work either.
Well, hey, listen, David, thanks for being on the show today. Thanks for, sharing your experiences with us. I really enjoyed getting to learn. I learned so much more about you, although we have, pretty regular interactions, being a member of Moorpark Morning Rotary and just all the things that you've done in the community. I've always seen you as someone that is a fair person. And I appreciate you as an asset to Moorpark and looking out for people here. So thank you for all that you do, all that you've done, and all that you will continue to do in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate the opportunity, and this was fun.
All right, cool. Well, guys, listen, hope you enjoyed this interview today with Mr. David Pollock. If you have any questions or any comments, please drop them in there. Also, please go to YouTube and subscribe to the Master Motivation Podcast. And just get ready because we got some more interviews coming up this week, next week, all the way through the end of this year, and further beyond that as well. So, David, thank you again so much. Hang around for a minute. I'll be right back. And guys, go out and make it a great rest of the week. Take care.